I thought I knew my husband. 7 years of marriage, a beautiful son, another baby on the way. From the outside, we look perfect. The successful politician and his devoted wife, living in a Boston penthouse with everything money could buy. But on one February night, everything I believed shattered in a single moment of violence. And the worst part? He just stood there, watching. What followed was a nightmare I never saw coming. Threats in the darkness. Secrets buried under my own name. A hidden life I never knew existed. And a choice that would either save me or destroy everything I had left. This is the story of how I went from victim to survivor. How I discovered that the man I married had been planning my destruction long before I ever gave him a reason. How a stranger's kindness became my lifeline when my own husband became my enemy. But it's also about something more important. The moment when you realize that surviving isn't enough. That sometimes you have to fight back. Even when you're terrified, even when everyone tells you you're wrong, even when the person you're fighting has all the power. Because some battles are worth the scars. So if you're ready for a story about betrayal, hidden truths, and the courage it takes to reclaim your own life, stay with me. This is the perfect lie. I never thought the life I built could collapse in a single evening. But standing in our Boston penthouse that February night, 7 months pregnant and terrified, I learned exactly how quickly everything can fall apart. The city lights glittered beyond our floor-to-ceiling windows, painting our living room in soft gold. Rick paced near the bar in his tailored navy suit, the one he wore for campaign events. His phone kept buzzing with messages he ignored while I tried to calm our 8-month-old son Noah in the nursery. There was a time years ago when Rick would have noticed me struggling. Back when we first married, he would drop everything to help with Noah, making silly faces until our baby giggled. That version of Rick felt like a stranger now. Somewhere between his second term as Massachusetts Speaker and this third campaign, the man I married had disappeared behind ambition and cold calculation. Sienna arrived just after 8, clicking across our marble floors in red stilettos. She was Rick's new campaign strategist, 26 years old with sharp cheekbones and sharper ambition. She smiled at me the way a cat smiles at a mouse. "Emily," she said, drawing out my name. "Still up? You should be resting." I shifted my weight, trying to ease the pressure on my lower back. I was just putting Noah down. Right. Sienna's eyes flicked to my pregnant belly with something like disgust. Must be exhausting, being so fragile all the time. Rick didn't even look up from his phone. My hands trembled as I set down Noah's bottle. Something felt wrong tonight, dangerous in a way I couldn't name. Sienna kept circling closer, her perfume overwhelming in the warm room. "Rick," I said quietly, "can we talk about tomorrow, the doctor's appointment?" He sighed, annoyed. Emily, I have a fundraiser. You know this." "It's the ultrasound. You said you would come." And I said I have commitments. His voice carried that edge I'd learned to fear. "Don't make everything a crisis." Sienna laughed, light and cruel. "See? Drama. I told you, Rick." That's when she pushed me. Not hard at first, just enough to make me stumble backward. My vision swam as I tried to catch my balance. "Stop," I whispered, but my voice barely carried. She pushed again, harder. "You're pathetic, clinging to a man who doesn't want you anymore." I reached for the counter, my heart racing. "Rick, please." He finally looked up, but his eyes were cold as winter stone. "Sienna, enough. Emily, stop being so dramatic." Dramatic. That word he used to dismiss everything. Every hurt, every fear. Sienna's third push sent me sideways. My head cracked against the marble coffee table edge. The sound echoed like a gunshot. White light exploded behind my eyes. Then darkness rushed in from all sides. I heard Noah crying from the nursery, thin and frightened. I tried to call out, but couldn't form words. My left eye felt strange, like a curtain dropping. Everything blurred into shadows and pain. The last thing I heard was Sienna's heels clicking away and Rick's voice, distant and irritated. "Great, now we'll have to call an ambulance." Then nothing. I woke in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and antiseptic smell. My head felt wrapped in layers of gauze and confusion. When I tried to open my eyes, only one responded. The left stayed dark, terrifyingly dark. A nurse came quickly when I stirred. "Mrs. Hartman, try to stay calm. You've had a serious head injury. Your vision should return, but you need rest." "My baby," I whispered, inside me. "Is he okay?" "Stable. The doctor will explain everything soon." "And Noah, my son, your husband took him home." The words hit me like another blow. Rick took Noah and left me here alone. Of course he did. Hours blurred together. Doctors came and went, shining lights in my eyes, asking the questions I couldn't fully answer through the fog of pain and fear. They said I had a severe concussion and trauma to my left eye. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned. Late that night, a man entered my room. His footsteps were different from the doctor's, quieter, more careful. He spoke with a voice that carried unexpected warmth. "Mrs. Hartman, I'm Daniel Miller. I work with patient services. Is there anything you need?" I tried to focus on his shape, but my vision wouldn't cooperate. "I can't see you clearly." "That's okay," he said gently. "I can read your charts to you, help you sign anything you need signed." Something in his tone made me want to cry. Simple kindness felt foreign after years with Rick. "My husband," I started, then stopped. What could I say? That he watched someone hurt me? That he left me here alone and broken? Daniel pulled a chair closer. "Your husband should be here. Whatever happened, you shouldn't be alone." Those words cracked something inside me. Tears came hot and fast, soaking the hospital pillow. This stranger saw what Rick refused to see. I was worth protecting. I mattered. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. Daniel's voice stayed steady. "Right now, you heal. The rest can wait." But I knew the rest couldn't wait. Something had to change, or the next time might kill me. Morning arrived with weak February sunlight filtering through hospital blinds. My head still throbbed, but the fog had lifted slightly. I could make out shapes now, blurred but recognizable. The left eye remained stubbornly dark. Daniel returned around 8, carrying coffee and a quiet competence I found oddly comforting. He helped me sit up carefully, adjusting the pillows behind my back. "How's the vision today?" he asked. "Better, still blurry on the right, nothing on the left." He nodded, pulling out a tablet. "The doctors want to keep you another day for observation. I can call someone for you if you need anything brought from home." I thought about the penthouse, about Rick and Sienna probably there right now, discussing how to spin this. My stomach turned. "I don't want anything from there." Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Even through my limited vision, I sensed he understood more than I was saying. "Mrs. Hartman, Emily, please just call me Emily." "Emily," he said carefully, "I've worked here 3 years. I've seen a lot of injuries that don't match the stories people tell." He paused. "You fell and hit your head?" The question hung in the air between us. This was it. The moment I either kept lying or told the truth. Every instinct screamed at me to protect Rick, protect our family, protect the image we'd carefully built. But another voice, newer and desperate, begged me to save myself. "My husband's assistant pushed me," I whispered. 3 times. He watched. He didn't stop her. Daniel's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. "We were arguing about a doctor's appointment. She got angry. I don't even know why. She just kept pushing and saying cruel things, and Rick told me I was being dramatic." The words tumbled out faster now. "I have an 8-month-old at home. I'm 7 months pregnant, and my husband thinks I'm the problem." "You're not the problem," Daniel said firmly. "Not even close." Something about his certainty made me look at him more carefully. Through the blur, I could make out a strong jaw, dark hair, eyes that looked tired in a way that came from experience, not just lack of sleep. "You sound very sure about that," I said softly. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke with careful honesty. "My sister dated someone like your husband. Controlling, manipulative, always making her think she was crazy for feeling hurt. I didn't recognize it soon enough to help her." He paused. By the time I understood what was happening, she'd already lost 2 years of her life to that man. "What happened?" "She finally left, but it took her hitting rock bottom first, and I'll always regret not pushing harder earlier." His voice carried a weight I recognized. Guilt. And so when I see someone in a situation like yours, I don't stay quiet anymore. His honesty disarmed me. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't swooping in as some flawless hero. He was just someone who'd learned a hard lesson and didn't want to repeat it. I have to think about my children, I said, placing a hand on my belly. Noah needs his father. This baby needs stability. Children need safety more than they need stability, Daniel replied gently, and they definitely need a mother who's alive and healthy. The words hit harder than I expected. Was I really considering staying after everything? The door opened and Rick walked in carrying Noah. My son reached for me immediately, and I took him with my good arm, breathing in his baby smell of milk and soap. Emily, Rick said smoothly, how are you feeling? Like someone cracked my skull open. He flinched slightly. Good. The doctor said you'll recover fully. That's great news. Daniel stood, positioning himself between Rick and me, subtle but deliberate. Rick noticed immediately, his politician's smile hardening. And you are? Daniel Miller, Patient Services. Well, Daniel, I'd like some privacy with my wife. Emily, Daniel said, ignoring Rick. Do you want me to stay or go? Rick's jaw tightened at the implication. No one challenged him, especially not hospital staff. I looked between them, holding Noah closer. Here it was, the choice, the real one. Not between Rick and Daniel, but between the comfortable lie I'd been living and the terrifying truth I'd been avoiding. Every part of me wanted to choose comfort. Send Daniel away, let Rick spin this into an accident, go home and pretend everything was fine. It would be easier, safer in a way. But then I thought about Noah growing up watching his father treat his mother like this. I thought about the baby inside me learning that love meant control and fear. I thought about myself at 60, still flinching at every raised voice, still apologizing for existing. Stay, I told Daniel quietly. Please stay. Rick's mask slipped for just a second, revealing the anger underneath. Emily, you're being ridiculous. No, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm being careful. Rick turned to Daniel. This is inappropriate. I could have you fired. You could try, Daniel replied calmly, but I'm not actually doing anything except standing here. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe ask yourself why. The tension crackling through the room made Noah fuss. I rocked him gently, keeping my eyes on Rick. We need to talk, Rick said, but alone. Then we can talk in a few days, I replied, when I'm out of the hospital. Emily, I'm tired, Rick. I need to rest. The doctor said so. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe I'd been so busy being the woman he wanted that I'd forgotten how to be myself. Finally, Rick straightened his tie and put his politician's smile back on. Of course. Rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. He leaned in to kiss my forehead, and I had to fight not to pull away. We'll get through this together. After he left, I sagged against the pillows, exhausted from the confrontation. Daniel sat back down, giving me space. That was brave, he said. That was terrifying. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I looked at Noah, who'd fallen asleep in my arms. What do I do now? Now you heal, Daniel said, and then you decide what kind of life you want. Not for him, not for some Aishmej, but for you and your children. It sounded so simple when he said it. So impossibly, dangerously simple. But as I sat in that hospital bed, holding my son, while another baby grew inside me, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what Rick wanted. I was thinking about what I needed to survive. They discharged me the next afternoon with strict instructions to rest and return immediately if my vision worsened. Daniel helped arrange transportation to a hotel by the Charles River. I couldn't go back to the penthouse. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Rick called 6 times during the drive. I let every call go to voicemail. The hotel room was small but clean, with soft lighting that didn't hurt my recovering eyes. Daniel helped me get Noah settled before stepping back toward the door. I should go, he said. Let you rest. Wait, I shifted Noah in my arms. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. He was quiet for a moment, hand on the doorknob. Because my sister Sarah didn't have anyone helping her. And because sometimes people need someone to believe them, even if they can't believe themselves yet. After he left, I fed Noah and tried to process everything. My phone kept buzzing. Rick's messages shifted from concerned to irritated to threatening. You're being irrational. Come home, we can work this out. You're embarrassing both of us. If you don't return by tonight, I'm calling my lawyer. I turned the phone off and focused on my son. Noah babbled happily, unaware his mother's entire world had fractured. I pressed my lips to his soft hair and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. The next morning, Daniel returned with coffee and newspapers. He set them on the table, then hesitated. There's something I need to show you, he said. I wasn't sure if I should, but I think you deserve to know. He pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs, documents with highlighted sections, bank statements that made my stomach drop. What is this? After your husband left yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about something he said. The way he mentioned his lawyer so quickly, like he'd already been planning it. Daniel sat across from me. I have a friend who works in financial compliance. I asked him to look into your husband's campaign accounts. I stared at the papers, my blurred vision struggling to focus. You investigated Rick? I know it's invasive, but something felt wrong, and I was right. He pointed to a highlighted line. These are payments from your husband's shell companies. Regular monthly payments going back 6 years to a woman named Rachel Hendricks in Cambridge. My heart started pounding. Who is she? Daniel pulled out another document, this one a birth certificate. She has a daughter, Madison Hendricks, born 6 years ago. Your husband is listed as the father. The room tilted. I gripped the table edge, trying to breathe. Rick had another child, a daughter. For 6 years, he'd been supporting a whole other family while telling me I was asking too much, expecting too much, needing too much. There's more, Daniel said gently. Some of these payments were made from accounts under your name. He's been using your identity to hide assets. I felt sick, not just betrayed, but implicated. If anyone investigated Rick's finances, they'd find my name everywhere. Why would he do this? Protection. If he gets caught, you're legally tied to everything. You become his shield. Daniel's expression was grim. Politicians like him learn to cover their tracks. They're very good at it. I looked at the photograph of the little girl, Madison. She had Rick's eyes, his strong chin. My children's half-sister. Does she know? I whispered. The mother? I don't know, but based on the payment amounts and frequency, he's been taking care of them financially. Taking care of them while neglecting us. While letting Sienna push me, hurt me, almost kill our unborn child. While building a public image as a family man, with me as the perfect political wife. The anger that rose in me was hot and sharp and clarifying. I want copies of everything, I said. Daniel nodded. I already made them for you. But Emily, if you use these, Rick will know someone helped you access them. He'll come after both of us. Then we'd better be ready. Something in my voice made him look at me differently. Not with pity anymore, but with recognition. Maybe even respect. Over the next 2 days, I studied every document. Daniel visited each morning, bringing food and updates. His friend in compliance found more evidence. Forged signatures, hidden accounts, payments to Sienna that went beyond any normal salary. He's been planning something, Daniel said on the 3rd day. All these shell companies, the money laundering, it's too complex to be just about hiding an affair. What do you think he's planning? I think he's preparing to run for higher office, maybe Congress, maybe even Senate. And he needs his finances clean before anyone looks too closely. Which meant he needed me, the loyal wife, the clean record, the perfect family image. That's all I'd ever been to him. A prop. My phone rang. Rick again. This time I answered. Emily, where are you? His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I've been patient, but this is ridiculous. I'm somewhere safe. Safe? You're safe with me. You're my wife. Am I? The question came out sharper than I intended. Or am I just convenient? Silence. Then his voice dropped, dangerous and low. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm tired, Rick. Tired of pretending everything's fine. Tired of being invisible. You're being emotional. The pregnancy hormones, don't you dare. The anger surprised me. Don't you dare blame my hormones for the fact that you let someone assault me. Sienna barely touched you. You fell. She pushed me 3 times and you watched. More silence. I could almost hear him recalculating, trying to find the right words to manipulate me back into compliance. Come home, he said finally. We'll talk about this properly. Face to face. No. Emily, no, I'm done, Rick. I'm done pretending, done apologizing, done being small enough to fit into your perfect political life. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice turning cold. If you don't come home, I'll have no choice but to take legal action regarding Noah. The threat landed exactly as he intended. Ice flooded my veins. You wouldn't. Try me. He hung up. I sat frozen, the phone trembling in my hand. Daniel had been in the kitchen making tea. He came back quickly. What happened? He threatened to take Noah. My voice cracked. He's going to file for custody. Daniel knelt in front of me. Then we fight back. With everything we have. How? He has money, lawyers, connections, and we have the truth. Daniel pointed to the documents spread across the table. We have proof he's been hiding assets, using your identity illegally, maintaining a secret family. No judge will look kindly on that. But what if they take my son anyway? What if I lose everything trying to fight him? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a heaviness I hadn't heard before. 6 years ago, my sister Sarah left her boyfriend. He'd been controlling and manipulative, but never physically violent. She thought she could just walk away. He paused. He filed for custody of their dog. It sounds stupid, but he knew she loved that dog more than anything. It was a way to hurt her, to keep control. What happened? She went back to him rather than fight. She thought it would be easier. Daniel's jaw tightened. 3 months later, she called me from the hospital. He'd broken her arm. That's when I finally understood how deep the manipulation went, how completely he'd made her believe she was worthless without him. Did she leave? Eventually, but it took her 2 years and a lot of pain to get free completely, and I'll always regret not pushing her harder to fight that first time. He met my eyes. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because running or giving in doesn't make men like Rick stop. It just gives them more power. His honesty anchored me. He wasn't pretending this would be easy or safe. He was just being real. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I whispered. You are. You just don't know it yet. Noah started crying from his carrier. I picked him up, holding him close. Through the hotel window, Boston glimmered in the late afternoon light. Somewhere out there, Rick was planning his next move. But for the first time, I was planning mine too. The call came from an unexpected source 2 days later. A woman named Alicia Rowan, one of Boston's top family law attorneys, had heard about my situation through a mutual contact. I don't know you personally, she said when I answered, but I know your husband's reputation. If you're serious about fighting him, I want to help. We met at her office that afternoon, a sleek space overlooking the financial district. Alicia was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and an air of controlled intensity that immediately put me at ease. I told her everything. The attack, the hospital, the secret daughter, the financial fraud. She took notes without interrupting, her expression growing darker as I spoke. He's made several serious mistakes, she said when I finished. Using your identity for financial fraud is illegal. The hidden child support creates a pattern of deception, and witnesses who saw your injuries can testify to the assault. But will it be enough, I asked. He has powerful friends. The governor is his college roommate, which means he has powerful enemies too. Alicia leaned forward. Politicians make opponents. I know 3 state senator bars who'd love to see Rick Hartman taken down a notch. If we time this correctly, we can turn his power against him. How? We go public, now, before he controls the narrative. The idea terrified me. Going public meant exposing everything, including my own pain and humiliation. Daniel, who'd come with me to the meeting, spoke up. What about Emily's safety? If Rick feels cornered, he'll lash out, Alicia finished, which is why we document everything, file restraining orders, and make sure the press knows she's under legal protection. Hurting her at that point would destroy him. I looked at the documents spread across her desk. My entire marriage reduced to paper trails and evidence. What if I fail? The question came out small. What if I do all this and lose anyway? Alicia's expression softened slightly. I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen women with nothing but bruises and determination take down men with unlimited resources. You know why they win? Why? Because the truth is harder to fight than lies. Lies require energy to maintain. The truth just has to exist. She paused. But I won't lie to you, Emily. This will be hard, Onita. He'll try to destroy you. The press will scrutinize everything. Your life will become public property for a while. I thought about Noah, about the baby growing inside me, about Madison, the 6-year-old half-sister who existed because Rick built an entire secret life. When do we start? Alicia smiled, sharp and satisfied. Tomorrow afternoon. I've already contacted 3 journalists who've been investigating Rick's campaign finances. They're very interested in speaking with you. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Alicia coached me on what to say, what not to say, how to handle aggressive questions. Daniel stayed close, a steady presence that kept me grounded when panic threatened to overwhelm me. The press conference was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at Alicia's office. When I arrived, my stomach was in knots. My vision had improved significantly, but my left eye still had a dark spot that the doctors said might never fully heal. A permanent reminder of that night. The room filled with reporters quickly. I recognized several faces from local news. Cameras turned on, lights blazing. Alicia stepped to the microphone first. Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Rowan, and I represent Emily Hartman, wife of Massachusetts Speaker Rick Hartman. We're here today to address serious allegations of assault, financial fraud, and domestic abuse. The room erupted with questions. Alicia raised a hand for silence. Mrs. Hartman will make a brief statement, then we'll take limited questions. Please be respectful. She stepped aside, and I moved to the microphone. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the podium to steady them. Noah was with a trusted babysitter, but I felt his absence like a missing limb. My name is Emily Hartman, I began, my voice quieter than I'd hoped. 3 weeks ago, I was assaulted in my home by my husband's campaign strategist while he watched and did nothing. I sustained a head injury that has left me with permanent vision damage. I am 7 months pregnant. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. For years, I believed I was the problem in our marriage. My husband told me I was too emotional, too demanding, too dramatic. I believed him. I paused, swallowing hard. But after the assault, I discovered evidence that my husband has been maintaining a secret family for 6 years, hiding assets under my name illegally, and using campaign funds for personal expenses. The room exploded with noise. Alicia stepped forward, but I shook my head. I wasn't done. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because no one should have to live in fear in their own home. I'm here because my children deserve better than watching their mother be destroyed. And I'm here because staying silent only protects the people who hurt us. I stepped back, trembling. Alicia fielded the barrage of questions with professional efficiency, but I barely heard the answers. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. Daniel caught my eye from the back of the room and gave a small nod. You did it. You told the truth? Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Minutes later, another text, this one with an attachment, a video file. I opened it with shaking hands. It was footage from the hospital, clearly taken without permission. Me, disoriented and blind, crying out in confusion. Edited to make me look unstable, dangerous even. The caption read, "Is this the woman who should have custody of children?" My blood ran cold. Rick had already started his counterattack, and he was just getting started. The video went viral within hours. By evening, it was everywhere. Social media, news sites, political blogs. Everyone had an opinion about the unstable wife of Speaker Hartman. She's clearly having a breakdown. Pregnancy hormones make women crazy. Another vindictive ex trying to destroy a good man. I sat in the hotel room watching my life become entertainment for strangers. Daniel had insisted on staying, worried about my safety. Noah slept peacefully in his portable crib, unaware his mother was being eviscerated online. Don't read the comments, Daniel said, taking my phone gently. They don't know you. They don't know what happened. But they believe Rick. My voice cracked. He's winning already. Alicia called at 9. The video was illegally obtained. We're filing complaints against the hospital and pursuing criminal charges for illegal surveillance. This will backfire on him. When? I asked bitterly. After I've lost everything? Emily, listen to me. Her voice was steel. He's panicking. This move was desperate, not strategic. Desperate men make mistakes. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Madison, Rick's secret daughter. What must it be like for her? Growing up knowing her father had another family, that she was the hidden one? Daniel made tea, setting a cup beside me. What are you thinking about? The little girl, Madison, she's only 6. She didn't choose any of this. Neither did you. But I'm an adult. I can fight back. What can she do? Daniel was quiet for a moment. My sister Sarah used to say something after she left her ex. She said the hardest part wasn't the abuse itself, it was realizing all the other people who got hurt because she stayed quiet. What do you mean? She found out later that he'd dated 3 women before her. All of them had similar stories. She wondered if she'd reported him earlier. Could she have saved them from the same pain? He looked at me steadily. You're not just fighting for yourself, Emily. You're fighting for Madison, too. And for every other woman Rick might hurt if he gets away with this. The thought sat heavy in my chest. I'd spent so long focused on my own survival that I hadn't considered the bigger picture. I want to meet her, I said suddenly. Madison's mother, Rachel. Daniel looked surprised. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, but I need to know the truth. All of it. Alicia was less enthusiastic about the plan. Rachel Hendricks could be hostile. She might see you as the enemy. Or she might be another victim, I countered. Either way, I need to know. It took 2 days to track down Rachel's address. She lived in Cambridge in a modest apartment building, very different from Rick's penthouse lifestyle. Daniel insisted on coming with me, staying in the car while I went inside. Rachel answered the door with a 6-year-old girl peeking from behind her legs. Madison had Rick's dark hair and his intense gaze. My heart twisted, seeing my children's half-sister. Can I help you? Rachel asked, wary. My name is Emily. I'm Rick Hartman's wife. Her expression hardened immediately. He told me you knew. He said you had an arrangement. The lie hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know, not until a week ago, where Rachel studied my face searching for deception. Finally, she stepped back. Come in, Madison, go play in your room for a few minutes. The apartment was small but warm, filled with children's drawings and photographs. Not a single picture included Rick. How long? I asked when we sat down. 7 years. We met at a campaign event. He said his marriage was over in everything but name, that you were staying together for appearances. Rachel's voice was bitter. I believed him for 3 years before I got pregnant. Then suddenly he couldn't leave you because of his political career. But he supported you financially. Blood money. She laughed without humor. He pays enough to keep us comfortable and quiet. I signed an NDA. If I talk publicly, he cuts us off completely. I pulled out the documents Daniel had found. He's using my name on these accounts. I had no idea. Rachel's eyes widened as she reviewed the papers. That bastard. He told me these were private accounts only he controlled. We're both his shields, I said quietly. Legal protection if anything goes wrong. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women bound together by the same man's deception. Why did you come here? Rachel asked finally. Because I'm fighting him. In court, publicly, everything. And I thought you should know. He's threatened to take my son if I don't back down. He won't stop, Rachel said. Men like Rick don't stop until they're forced to. Then I'm going to force him. I met her eyes. But I need your help. Your testimony about the NAA, the payments, the lies. It would show a pattern. I'll lose everything if I break the NDA. Madison's health insurance, her school. You'll lose more if you stay silent, I said gently. Because he'll use her too, eventually. She'll grow up knowing she was the secret, the mistake. Is that what you want for her? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She looked toward the hallway where Madison was playing, probably listening to everything. I'll think about it, she said finally. As I left, Madison appeared in the hallway. She looked at me with Rick's eyes and asked in a small voice, Are you my dad's other wife? The question broke my heart. Yes, sweetie, I am. Does he live with you? He does. Why doesn't he live with us? I knelt down, meeting her at eye level despite my pregnant belly. I don't know, Madison, but it's not because of anything you did. You're a wonderful little girl. In the car, Daniel could see I'd been crying. How did it go? She's thinking about testifying. But Daniel? I turned to him. We have to win. Not just for me or Noah. For Madison, too. She deserves better than being Rick's guilty secret. Then we'll win, he said simply. But that night, Rick made his next move. And it was far worse than I'd imagined. The news broke at 6 in the morning. I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. Daniel, who'd fallen asleep in the hotel room's chair, jerked awake at the sound. What's happening? I couldn't speak. I just turned my phone toward him. The headline read, Speaker Hartman files emergency custody request, claims wife mentally unstable and dangerous. Underneath was a photo of me from the hospital, looking wild-eyed and disheveled. Rick's statement painted me as someone having a pregnancy-induced psychotic break. He claimed I'd become paranoid, making false accusations to destroy his career. He said I'd abandoned Noah, leaving him alone in the penthouse for days. All lies. Strategic, careful lies designed to sound just believable enough. He's claiming you abandoned Noah? Daniel read the statement with growing horror. You took him with you to the hotel. No one knows that. My hands trembled. Rick brought him back home after I left. He's been with Rick for a week. Then we show them the truth. Hotel records. My testimony. His word against ours. And he's a respected politician with no history of violence. I'm the unstable wife making accusations. Alicia called minutes later. We're filing counter motions immediately. This is harassment and defamation. But Emily, you need to prepare yourself. The custody hearing is in 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days to prove I deserved my own son. The media circus intensified throughout the day. Reporters camped outside Alicia's office in the hotel. Social media divided into camps, some supporting me, most defending Rick. She's clearly disturbed. Classic case of pregnancy psychosis. Why would a successful man risk everything for an affair when he has a beautiful wife? She's jealous and vindictive. Each comment was a small cut, death by 1,000 opinions. Daniel stayed close, fielding calls and coordinating with Alicia. I noticed the toll it was taking on him, too. Dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders he tried to hide. You don't have to do this, I said that afternoon. You barely know me. This isn't your fight. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Maybe I barely know you, but I know what's right, and I know I can't walk away from someone who needs help. He paused. Not again. Your sister? She called me 3 times before she finally left her boyfriend. 3 times I told her she was overreacting, that maybe she was being too sensitive. By the time I believed her, she'd already lost so much. His voice was rough with old guilt. I won't make that mistake twice. There was something else in his expression too, something I wasn't ready to name. Care, maybe. Or the beginning of something deeper that had no business existing in the middle of this chaos. Daniel. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, Emily. Sienna's voice was silk over steel. How's the media treating you? My stomach dropped. What do you want? Just to chat, woman to woman. I heard her smile. Rick's been so stressed lately, all these accusations, the press, it's really affecting his work. Good. You sound angry. That won't look good in court. Unstable, aggressive wives don't get custody. And women who assault pregnant women go to jail. Do they? Sienna laughed. Because I don't see any charges. No witnesses except a husband who will say you fell. Even your hospital records say possible fall injury. She was right. The doctors had been careful, documenting what they saw but not speculating on cause. Why are you calling? I asked through gritted teeth. To offer you a deal. Drop everything, admit you had a breakdown, Rick gets sole custody, you get supervised visitation. In exchange, he won't pursue charges against you for defamation and filing false reports. I didn't file false reports. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what we can prove. Her voice hardened. You can't win, Emily. Rick has resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, investigators, friends in every level of government. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky to see Noah once a month. Rage flooded through me, hot and clarifying. Tell Rick he can go to hell, and you can join him. I hung up, shaking. Daniel had heard everything. She's bluffing, trying to scare you. It's working. Emily. He moved closer, careful not to crowd me. Fear is how he's controlled you all along. The moment you stop being afraid, he loses his power. I'm not brave like you think I am. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He paused. Every time you've stood up to him, you've been terrified, but you did it anyway. That's courage. Before I could respond, Alicia burst through the door, laptop in hand. We found something, she said breathlessly. Rick made a mistake. She turned the laptop toward us. On screen was an email chain between Rick and his lawyer from 6 months ago. They were discussing strategies for managing Emily if she became a liability during his Senate run. He's been planning this, Alicia said, long before the assault. He knew he might need to discredit you, so he started building a narrative. See here? He tells his lawyer Emily's had been acting strangely, becoming paranoid. But I wasn't, I said, reading the emails with growing horror. 6 months ago, everything was fine. Or I thought it was. Exactly, he was laying groundwork, creating a paper trail that would support claims of mental instability. Alicia's smile was sharp, but it proves premeditation. He was preparing to destroy you before you ever gave him a reason. Can we use this in court? Absolutely. It shows malicious intent. Combined with the illegal surveillance video and Rachel's testimony, if she agrees, we can establish a clear pattern of manipulation. For the first time in days, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe we really could win. But that night, Rick sent one final message that changed everything. A photo of Noah, asleep in his crib, and underneath, sleep tight, Emily, while you still can. The implication was clear. He knew where I was staying, and he was close enough to hurt me whenever he wanted. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the hotel corridor made me jump. Daniel insisted on staying, sleeping in the chair with his phone in hand, ready to call police at any sign of trouble. But Rick didn't come. The threat was enough. He knew it would keep me terrified, off balance, unable to think clearly. At dawn, I made a decision. I need to get Noah, I told Daniel. Today. I can't leave him there anymore. Rick won't let you just take him. Then I'll get a court order, emergency protective custody, something. I stood, pacing despite my exhaustion. I'm done reacting. I'm done letting him make every move while I just defend. Alicia arrived an hour later. When I told her my plan, she nodded slowly. It's risky. If the judge thinks you're acting impulsively, the judge needs to see a mother protecting her child from a man who sends threatening photos at midnight. I pulled out my phone, showing her Rick's message. That's not normal behavior. That's intimidation. Alicia studied the photo. You're right. File for emergency custody this morning. Judge Morrison is on duty. She has kids of her own. She'll understand. By noon, we were in family court. Rick's lawyer was caught off guard, unprepared for our sudden offensive. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 50s, listened to both sides with growing disapproval. Mr. Hartman, she said finally, you sent your wife a photograph of your son at midnight with the caption, "Sleep tight while you still can?" Rick's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, my client was simply reassuring Mrs. Hartman that their son was safe. That's not reassurance, that's a threat. Judge Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Hartman, where are you currently residing? A hotel, Your Honor, for my safety. And your husband knows the location? I hesitated. Alicia nodded encouragement. Yes, Your Honor. He implied as much in his message. The judge's expression hardened. I'm granting temporary emergency custody to Mrs. Hartman pending the full hearing. Mr. Hartman, you will surrender Noah to his mother by 5 p.m. today. If you fail to comply, I will hold you in contempt. Rick's face went white. For the first time, I saw him genuinely shocked. He'd expected his power and connections to carry the day. Your Honor, his lawyer protested, my client poses no danger. Your client is sending threatening messages to his pregnant wife while filing for custody. That demonstrates poor judgment at best, intimidation at worst. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. 5 p.m., Mr. Hartman, don't test me. Outside the courthouse, I nearly collapsed with relief. Daniel caught me, steadying me. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd risked his calm, his time, his safety for someone he barely knew. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Something shifted in the air between us. Daniel's hand was still on my arm, warm and steady. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Emily, he started, don't. I stepped back gently. Please don't. Not now. He nodded, understanding. How could I think about feelings when I was still legally married, still pregnant with Rick's child, still fighting for basic survival? But the pull was there, undeniable and complicated. At 5 p.m. exactly, Rick's car pulled up to a neutral location the judge had specified. He got out with Noah in his arms, moving with rigid control. This was killing him, being forced to comply. Emily, he said as he handed over our son. This isn't over. I know. I took Noah, holding him close. But it's ending. His eyes hardened. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I replied steadily. I do. I lived with it for years. The difference is, I'm not afraid anymore. It was a lie. I was terrified. But he didn't need to know that. Back at the hotel, I held Noah and cried. Relief, fear, exhaustion, all of it pouring out at once. Daniel sat quietly nearby, just being present. What happens now, I asked when the tears finally stopped. Now you prepare for the full custody hearing, and now we take the fight to him. How? We find everyone else he's hurt, every campaign worker he mistreated, every reporter he threatened, every politician he blackmailed. Men like Rick don't start being monsters overnight. There's always a trail. Over the next 3 days, we dug deeper. Daniel's friend in financial compliance found more hidden accounts. Alicia tracked down 3 former campaign staffers willing to testify about Rick's behavior, and Rachel finally agreed to break her NDA, understanding that protecting Madison meant exposing Rick. But the biggest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sienna called me directly. We need to talk, she said, her usual confidence cracking. Not over the phone, in person. Why would I meet with you? Because Rick just threw me under the bus, and I'm done protecting him. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge. Sienna looked different without her polished armor. Tired, scared human. What happened? I asked, not trusting her, but curious. Rick told his lawyer I acted alone, that he tried to stop me from pushing you, but I was out of control. Her laugh was bitter. He's making me the villain to save himself. You were the villain, you pushed me. I know. She looked down at her coffee. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering information. What information? Rick has been planning to run for Senate. He needed a scandal-free image, which meant dealing with you and Rachel. He had me collecting dirt on both of you for months. Doctor's appointments, their therapy sessions, anything he could use to prove instability. My blood ran cold. You've been stalking me? Following you, taking photos, recording conversations when I could. She pulled out a USB drive. This has everything, including recordings of Rick planning exactly how to destroy you if you ever became a problem. I stared at the small drive. It could change everything. Why are you giving me this? Because I was stupid enough to think he cared about me. I believed him when he said you were the obstacle to our future together. Sienna's voice broke. But he just told his lawyer I'm mentally unstable too. He'll destroy anyone who threatens him, and I'm done being used. I took the USB drive. This doesn't make us even. You hurt me. Badly. I know. I'll probably go to jail for assault, but at least Rick's going down too. After she left, I sat staring at the drive. It felt heavy with possibility and danger. Daniel arrived minutes later. When I showed him what Sienna had given us, his expression was grim. This could win everything, but Emily, once you use this, there's no going back. Rick will come after you with everything he has. He's already doing that. This will be worse. Public, brutal, ugly. I thought about Noah, about the baby inside me, about Madison living in the shadows of her father's lies. Then let it be ugly. I said, I'm done hiding. Alicia spent 2 days reviewing everything on Sienna's USB drive. When she finally called me to her office, her expression was somewhere between triumph and shock. Emily, this is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. She played me the first recording. Rick's voice came through clearly, discussing strategy with his lawyer. Emily's been compliant so far, but pregnancy makes women unpredictable. We need contingencies. If she becomes difficult, we'll need medical documentation of instability. Can you find a psychiatrist willing to review her behavior? Another voice, the lawyer. I know someone who owes me a favor, but Rick, are you sure this is necessary? I'm about to announce my Senate run. I need a perfect family image or a sympathetic single-father narrative. Either works, but I need to control which story gets told. The casual cruelty in his voice made me sick. There's more, Alicia said, playing another file. This one was Rick and Sienna discussing me directly. She's getting suspicious, Sienna said. Asked about your late nights again. Let her be suspicious. As long as she stays quiet publicly, it doesn't matter. Rick sounded bored. If she pushes, we'll leak that she's having emotional problems. Plant some stories about erratic behavior. And if that doesn't work, then we make sure she has an accident that looks like pregnancy complications. Nothing fatal, just scary enough to keep her focused on recovery instead of my activities. I froze. He was planning to hurt me, months before Sienna actually did. Worse, Alicia said grimly. This proves premeditation. He wasn't reacting to your behavior. He was manufacturing a crisis to justify controlling you. Over the next week, we built an airtight case. Financial records showing Rick had embezzled campaign funds. Testimony from Rachel about the hidden family. Statements from former staffers about Rick's pattern of intimidation. And now, recordings proving he'd planned to destroy me regardless of what I did. But Rick wasn't finished either. 3 days before the full custody hearing, he released a statement claiming I'd tried to blackmail him with false accusations to extort money in a divorce settlement. He provided evidence showing I'd consulted divorce lawyers months earlier, implying I'd been planning this. The problem was I had consulted a divorce lawyer once 18 months ago when things got particularly bad. I'd ultimately decided to try to make the marriage work, but Rick had clearly been tracking that meeting. Social media erupted again. She's a gold digger. This was all a setup to take his money. Classic false accusation for financial gain. I watched the narrative spin out of control, feeling helpless again. How could we fight someone who twisted every truth into a weapon? Daniel found me sitting in the dark hotel room, Noah asleep beside me. Hey, he said softly, don't read the comments. I'm not. I'm just thinking about how good Rick is at this. He takes every real thing, my fear, my pain, my attempts to protect myself, and makes them look calculated and false. Daniel sat across from me. That's what abusers do. They're experts at making victims look crazy for defending themselves. Are you speaking from experience? He was quiet for a long moment. After my sister finally left her boyfriend, he sued her for defamation. Said she'd ruined his reputation with false abuse claims. He had friends testify that he was a great guy, that Sarah was dramatic and attention-seeking. What happened? She almost lost. The jury was split until the very end. Daniel's voice was heavy. But one thing saved her. A neighbor had witnessed him grabbing Sarah violently months earlier. That one outside witness made the difference between guilty and not guilty. You're saying we need outside witnesses. I'm saying Rick's been very careful to control the narrative. But there's always something he can't control, some detail he overlooked. The next day we found it. Alicia's investigator discovered that the hospital had external security cameras Rick hadn't known about. They showed him arriving the night I was injured, not to visit me, but to speak with hospital administration about suppressing my medical records. More damning, the cameras caught him placing something in the room where I recovered. A small device that looked suspiciously like a hidden camera. He was recording you, Alicia said, without consent while you were medically vulnerable. That's illegal on multiple levels. We also found security footage from the building where Rick's secret apartment was located. The apartment he'd rented under a shell company where he'd been living a double life with Rachel and Madison. The footage showed him coming and going for years, destroying his claim that the relationship was brief and meaningless. But the final piece came from the most unexpected source. Rick's mother called me. Emily? Her voice was frail over the phone. It's Margaret, Rick's mother. I hadn't spoken to my mother-in-law in months. Rick had told me she was too ill for visits. Margaret, are you all right? I'm fine, dear, but I need to tell you something. About Richard. She used his full name, the way she did when she was disappointed in him. I've been watching the news, seeing what he's saying about you. She paused. Emily, I need you to know something. Richard's father was exactly like this, controlling, manipulative. I spent 30 years in that marriage before he died, and I'll regret every day I stayed quiet. Why are you telling me this? Because I should have left when Richard was young. Should have shown him that kind of behavior has consequences. Her voice broke. Instead, I taught him that men can treat women however they want as long as they're successful enough. I created a monster, Emily, and I need to help you stop him. What are you offering? Testimony about Richard's father, about patterns I've seen in Richard since childhood, and documents. She paused. I have records my husband kept of ways he manipulated me. Legal maneuvers, financial control, all of it. Richard learned from the best. Margaret, if you do this, Rick will. Richard already cut me out of his life when I questioned his treatment of you last year. I have nothing left to lose and everything to make right. That evening, Alicia reviewed Margaret's documents with growing amazement. This is a psychology textbook on generational abuse. The similarities between Rick's father's behavior and Rick's current actions are remarkable. She looked at me. With Margaret's testimony, we can show this isn't a one-time mistake or misunderstanding. It's a pattern learned and refined over decades. Will the judge allow it? Character witnesses? Absolutely, especially when it comes from his own mother. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we might actually win. Not just survive, but truly win. But Daniel cautioned me against overconfidence. Rick's at his most dangerous when cornered, he said. The hearing is in 2 days. He knows he's losing control. Be prepared for anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's confession, about how abuse echoes through generations until someone has the courage to break the cycle. I thought about Noah sleeping peacefully in his portable crib, about the baby inside me, about Madison growing up in the shadow of her father's lies. If I didn't stop Rick now, would my children repeat these patterns? Would Noah grow up thinking this was how you treat people you love? Would my daughter learn to accept cruelty as affection? The thought terrified me more than any of Rick's threats. I had to win. Not just for me, but for the next generation. The custody hearing began on a cold March morning. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and Rick's supporters who believed his version of events. I sat beside Alicia, wearing a simple blue dress that accommodated my now 8-month pregnant belly. Daniel was in the gallery, along with Rachel, Margaret, and several other witnesses we'd gathered. Rick sat across the aisle with his legal team, looking every inch the successful politician. Confident, composed, righteous. Judge Morrison called the court to order, and Rick's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, this case is unfortunately simple. Mrs. Hartman has suffered from pregnancy-related mental health issues, leading her to make increasingly desperate and false accusations against my client. We have medical experts who will testify. Save your opening for when I ask for it, Judge Morrison interrupted. Mrs. Rowan? Alicia stood. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Rick Hartman has engaged in years of systematic abuse, financial fraud, and intimidation. He maintained a secret family while using his wife's identity to hide illegal campaign contributions. When Mrs. Hartman discovered this, he orchestrated a campaign to destroy her credibility rather than face consequences for his actions. Over the next 3 hours, we presented our case: financial documents, recordings, testimony from Rachel about the hidden family, statements from campaign staffers about Rick's treatment of employees. Then came Margaret. She walked slowly to the witness stand, an elderly woman facing down her own son in public. Rick's expression turned to stone as she was sworn in. Mrs. Hartman, Alicia began gently, you're Richard Hartman's mother, is that correct? Yes. Can you tell the court about Richard's father? My husband was a successful businessman, and a terrible husband. He controlled every aspect of my life, where I went, who I spoke to, what I wore. He made me believe I was incapable of functioning without him. Margaret's voice was steady but sad, and I watched him teach these same tactics to Richard. Can you give specific examples? When Richard was 15, he started dating a girl at school. One day I heard him telling her that she was too sensitive, that her feelings were irrational. The exact words his father used on me. She looked at Rick. I should have corrected him then. Instead, I stayed silent. I enabled this. Rick's lawyer objected, but Judge Morrison overruled him. Margaret continued describing pattern after pattern, years of learned manipulation. By the time she finished, several jurors were taking notes furiously. Then Alicia played the recordings from Sienna's USB drive. Rick's voice filled the courtroom, coldly planning how to destroy me if I became inconvenient, discussing making me have an accident, instructing his lawyer to find ways to document my supposed instability before there was any evidence of it. I watched Rick's face drain of color as his own words convicted him. His lawyer tried to argue the recordings were taken illegally, but Alicia countered that Sienna had recorded them as part of her work duties, making them admissible. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood shakily, placing one hand on my pregnant belly for courage. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking to the edge of a cliff. Alicia guided me through the timeline, the isolation that started gradually. Rick's increasing control over our finances, my movements, my relationships. The night Sienna pushed me while he watched. The hospital, the threats, everything. Then Rick's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Hartman, isn't it true you consulted a divorce attorney 18 months ago? Yes. So you've been planning to leave your husband for quite some time? I was considering it, but I decided to try to make our marriage work. Or you decided to wait for the right moment to maximize your financial gain. Alicia objected, but the seed was planted. Rick's lawyer continued. You claim my client planned to hurt you, yet you have no evidence he ever physically touched you. He didn't have to. He let Sienna do it while he watched. So you say, but we only have your word for that. And the hospital records showing my injuries, which could have been from a fall, exactly as my client stated. I felt control slipping. He was good at this, twisting everything. Then Rick's lawyer made a mistake. Mrs. Hartman, if your husband is truly so terrible, why did you stay married to him for so long? The courtroom went quiet. It was the question everyone always asked abuse victims, the one that made us feel stupid and complicit. I looked directly at Rick for the first time that day. Because he was very good at making me believe I was the problem. Because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. Because I kept hoping the man I married would come back. I paused. But mostly because I didn't know yet that I was strong enough to survive without him. The words hung in the air, simple and true. Judge Morrison called a recess. During the break, Daniel found me in the hallway. You did great, he said. I don't know. Rick's lawyer made me sound calculating. No one believes that, not after hearing those recordings. When we reconvened, Judge Morrison looked at Rick directly. Mr. Hartman, I'm going to give you an opportunity to address the court directly. Not through your lawyer. I want to hear from you. Rick stood, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. Handsome, charismatic, seemingly sincere. Your Honor, I love my wife. I love my children. Have I made mistakes? Yes. The relationship with Rachel Hendricks was wrong, and I've been trying to make amends privately. He paused, looking humble. But I've never wanted to hurt Emily. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding, amplified by pregnancy stress and outside influences. It was a masterful performance. I saw several people in the gallery nodding. Then Alicia stood. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence. We'd like to call Madison Hendricks to testify. Rick's face went white. His lawyer objected immediately. You're calling a 6-year-old child? We're calling Mr. Hartman's daughter, whom he's denied publicly while claiming to love his children. Alicia's voice was steel. I think her testimony is relevant. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it, but brief questioning only. Rachel led Madison to the stand. The little girl looked scared but determined. Madison, Alicia said gently, do you know who that man is? She pointed to Rick. That's my daddy. Does your daddy live with you? No. Has he ever lived with you? No, he visits sometimes, but not at our house. We meet at restaurants. Why doesn't he visit your house? Madison looked confused. Mommy says it's complicated. That daddy has another family he loves more. The courtroom collectively gasped. Rick closed his eyes. One more question, Madison. Has your daddy ever told you that you're his daughter? No, he says I have to call him Uncle Richard when other people are around. Alicia let that sit for a moment before thanking Madison gently and letting her go. Judge Morrison looked at Rick with undisguised disgust. Mr. Hartman, you claim to love your children, yet you forced your own daughter to pretend you're not her father? Rick had no answer. The judge took a brief recess to consider her ruling. 30 minutes felt like hours. When she returned, her expression was stern. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, said, the recordings of Mr. Hartman planning to manipulate his wife, the financial fraud, the testimony of multiple witnesses about his pattern of control and abuse, and most damningly, his treatment of his own daughter. She looked at me. Mrs. Hartman, I'm granting you full physical custody of Noah and any children born to you in the future. Mr. Hartman will have supervised visitation only, pending completion of anger management and parenting classes. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly fainted. Alicia grabbed my arm, steadying me. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm referring this matter to the State Ethics Commission for investigation into Mr. Hartman's campaign finance violations, and to the district attorney for possible criminal charges related to illegal surveillance and financial fraud. Rick stood, his face twisted with rage. Your Honor, this court is adjourned. The gavel struck with finality. As people filed out, Rick locked eyes with me across the courtroom. The mask was completely gone now. Only hatred remained. This isn't over, he mouthed. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Alicia gave a brief statement while I held Noah close. Daniel stood beside me, a quiet presence I'd come to depend on. But as we walked to the car, I saw Sienna standing at the edge of the crowd. She caught my eye and gave a small nod. Not friendship, not absolution, but acknowledgement. We'd both been used by Rick. The difference was I'd found a way out. 3 weeks later, I gave birth to a daughter. I named her Grace, for the grace I'd needed to survive and the grace I wanted to give her, a life free from fear. The hospital room was peaceful. No drama, no cameras, just me and my newborn daughter and Noah playing quietly nearby. Daniel brought flowers but stayed in the hallway, respectful of boundaries we were still figuring out. Rick had visitation rights starting when Grace turned 3 months old. Supervised visits only, 2 hours every other Saturday. It wasn't the clean break I'd hoped for, but it was better than I'd feared. He would always be part of our lives, unfortunately, but he'd never again have power over me. The state ethics investigation revealed that Rick had embezzled over $200,000 in campaign funds. He resigned from his position as Speaker rather than face impeachment. The Senate run disappeared overnight. Rachel and I had become unlikely allies. Madison visited sometimes, playing with Noah while Rachel and I figured out how to co-parent children who shared a father neither of us wanted. It was complicated and messy, and nothing like I'd imagined. But it was honest. Margaret became a surprisingly strong presence in my life. She helped with Noah, apologizing constantly for not stopping Rick's father, for not teaching Rick better. I told her she couldn't fix the past, but she could help build a better future. That's all any of us can do, she said, holding Grace for the first time. Break the cycle. Choose differently. Sienna pleaded guilty to assault charges and received probation plus anger management classes. I didn't attend her sentencing. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Daniel and I moved slowly, carefully. He'd become Noah's favorite person, making silly faces that sent my son into giggles. But we both knew we'd built our connection in crisis. We needed to discover if it could exist in peace. I'm not going anywhere, he said one evening, helping me feed Grace while Noah napped. But I also don't want to rush you into something you're not ready for. What if I'm never ready? I asked honestly. What if Rick broke something in me that can't be fixed? Then we figure it out together, at whatever pace you need. He smiled. I'm patient. You're also too good to be true. I'm really not. His smile faded. I have baggage too, Emily. I've failed my sister. I have trust issues. I'm probably too protective because of what happened to her. He paused. But I'm trying to do better. That's all I can promise. His honesty made me trust him more, not less. 6 months after the custody hearing, I filed for divorce. Rick didn't contest it. He was too busy fighting criminal charges and trying to rebuild his shattered reputation. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday in October. I walked out of the courthouse holding Grace with Noah in a stroller and Daniel waiting in the parking lot. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free, terrified, hopeful, exhausted." I laughed. "All of it at once." "That sounds about right." We went to a park near the Charles River, letting Noah run while I nursed Grace on a bench. The fall colors were brilliant, red and gold against blue sky. Daniel sat beside me, not too close, just present. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what comes next. And I want to go back to school, finish my degree." I dropped out when I married Rick, focusing on being the perfect political wife instead. Maybe study law, help other women who are where I was. "That's a great idea. It'll be hard, 2 kids, school, everything. You've done harder." He looked at me with that steady confidence I'd come to trust. "You took on one of the most powerful men in Massachusetts and won. Law school will be easy in comparison." I leaned against his shoulder carefully, testing the connection. He didn't move away or pull me closer, just let me rest. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything, for believing me when I couldn't believe myself. You did the hard part. I just stayed present." That's not a small thing. We sat in comfortable silence, watching Noah chase pigeons with pure joy. Grace fell asleep in my arms, tiny and perfect, in mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Madison wants to know if Noah can come to her birthday party next month." I know it's complicated, but I looked at Daniel. "Should I say yes? Do you want to?" I thought about Madison calling Rick Uncle Richard in public, about a 6-year-old girl learning to hide who she was to make her father comfortable. Yes, I decided. These kids didn't choose this. They shouldn't suffer because their father's a monster. Then say yes, so I did. That evening, back at my new apartment, small but mine, paid for with money I'd earned doing freelance work, I put both kids to bed and stood at the window overlooking Boston. Somewhere out there, Rick was living his diminished life, smaller, quieter, stripped of the power he'd wielded so carelessly. Sometimes I felt sorry for him. Mostly I felt nothing. He was my past. This, Noah's laughter, Grace's tiny fingers, Daniel's steady friendship, Rachel's tentative trust, Margaret's redemption, my own slow healing. This was my future. Not perfect, not easy, not the life I'd imagined when I said I do all those years ago, but it was mine, truly mine, and that made it worth everything. I thought about the Emily who'd stood in that penthouse 7 months ago, pregnant and terrified, watching her husband let someone hurt her. That Emily believed she was weak, broken, unable to survive alone. But she had survived. Not just survived, transformed. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. In the other room, Grace started to cry. I went to her, lifting her into my arms, breathing in that newborn smell. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "Mama's here. Mama's always here." And as I rocked my daughter in the darkness, I realized something profound. The story Rick tried to write about me, the unstable wife, the vindictive woman, the dramatic failure, that story was over. Now I got to write my own. And it started not with revenge or triumph, but with something simpler and more powerful. It started with survival. Everything else would grow from there. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones where we're defending our right to simply exist, where we're arguing that our pain is real, our experience valid, our survival worth fighting for. Those battles leave scars, but scars mean you fought. Scars mean you survived. And sometimes survival is the greatest victory of all. If you're in that fight right now, the one where everyone tells you you're overreacting, being dramatic, causing problems, hear this. Your instincts are right. Your pain is real. And you're stronger than the person trying to make you small. The ending might not be neat. The healing might take years. But choosing yourself, protecting yourself, believing yourself, that's where freedom begins. Not in the perfect resolution, but in the courageous choice to stop accepting cruelty as love. That's where Emily's story ended, and where yours can begin. So that's where Emily's story ends. From a woman who couldn't see her own worth to someone who rewrote her entire future. But here's what I want you to think about. How many people around you right now are living in their own version of Emily's nightmare? Smiling on the outside while breaking on the inside, believing they're the problem when they're actually the victim. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, think something, or see something differently, I need your help spreading it. Hit that like button so this story reaches someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone, that survival is possible, that their instincts are right. And if you want more stories like this, stories about real people facing impossible choices and finding the courage to fight back, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because Emily's story might be over, but there are so many more voices that deserve to be heard. Remember, your pain is valid, your survival matters, and you're stronger than anyone who's tried to make you small. I'll see you in the next story.